KaraokeBooks.
The Captain's Daughter. Aleksandr Pushkin. Translated by Ekaterina Telfer. Audiobook. Chapter 12. The Orphan. Our kibitka stopped at the commandant's house. The people had recognized the sound of Pugachev's bells, and came out in a throng to meet him. Shvabrin received the pretender at the very threshold. He wore a Cossack uniform, and had allowed his beard to grow. The traitor helped Pugachev to alight with fawning demonstrations of joy and zeal. He looked confused upon seeing me, but soon recovered himself and stretched out his hand, saying, "And thou also art one of us? That's right. It should have been so long ago." I turned away without making any reply. My heart ached when I found myself in the old familiar room where the late commandant's commission still hung from the wall, a sad epitaph on times gone by. Pugachev seated himself on the sofa where Ivan Kozmich used to doze, lulled to sleep by his consort's grumbling. Shvabrin himself carried a glass of vodka to him. Pugachev drank it off, and said, pointing to me, "Offer some to his lordship as well." Shvabrin approached me with the tray, but I turned away from him a second time. He did not look like himself. With his usual perspicacity, he could not have failed to observe Pugachev's displeasure. He quailed before him, and looked at me mistrustfully. Pugachev made inquiries as to the condition of the fortress, as to the prevalent rumors in regard to the enemy, and such like, when suddenly and unexpectedly he asked, "Tell me, my little brother, who is the girl thou holdest here imprisoned? Let me see her." Shvabrin turned deadly pale. "Sire," said he in a trembling voice. "Sire, she is not imprisoned. She is ill. She is in bed." "Led me to her chamber then," said the pretender, rising. Refusal was impossible. Shvabrin conducted Pugachev to Maria Ivanovna's room. I followed them. Shvabrin stopped on the staircase. "Sire," said he, "you have it in your power to demand whatever you please of me, but do not permit a stranger to enter my wife's bedroom." I shook all over. "Then thou art married," said I to Shvabrin, prepared to tear him to pieces. "Silence," interrupted Pugachev, "that is my business. As to thee," he continued, addressing Shvabrin, "I will have no subtlety and no shamming. She may be thy wife or not, but I take who I please into her room. Your lordship, follow me." Shvabrin again stopped when we had reached the bedroom door, and said falteringly, "Sire, I warn you, she is in a high state of fever and has been delirious these 3 days." "Open the door," said Pugachev. Shvabrin searched his pockets and said he had forgotten the key. Pugachev kicked the door, the lock gave way, the door flew open, and we entered. On looking about me, I felt ready to faint. On the floor sat Maria Ivanovna, clad in a peasant's dress, pale, haggard, and disheveled. A jug of water, covered with a lump of bread, was by her side. On seeing me she started and screamed. I cannot express what my feelings were. Pugachev looked at Shvabrin, and said with a bitter sneer, "Thy hospital is not bad." He then approached Maria Ivanovna. "Tell me, my little dove, why does thy husband punish thee? How hast thou wronged him?" "Husband," she repeated. "He is not my husband. I shall never be his wife. I prefer to die, and I shall die, if I am not rescued." Pugachev looked at Shvabrin menacingly. "And thou hast dared to deceive me," said he. "Dost thou know, thou good-for-nothing, what thou deservest?" Shvabrin dropped on his knees. At such a sight, contempt overcame every feeling of hatred and wrath within me. I looked with loathing upon the nobleman who was writhing at the feet of a Cossack deserter. Pugachev relented. "I pardon thee this time," said he to Shvabrin, "but know that the first time thou offendest, this also will be reckoned against thee." He then turned to Maria Ivanovna, and said to her kindly, "Come away, my pretty girl. I grant thee thy freedom. I am the Tsar." Maria Ivanovna threw a quick glance at him, and guessed that it was the murderer of her parents who stood before her. She covered her face with her hands, and fell senseless to the floor. I rushed to her side. At that moment my old acquaintance Polashka slipped boldly into the room, and began to busy herself about her mistress. Pugachev left the chamber, and we three descended into the sitting-room. "Well, your lordship," said Pugachev, laughing, "now that we have freed the pretty girl, what dost thou think of our sending for the priest to marry his niece? I shall give her away if thou wishest. Shvabrin will be the best man. We shall feast, and drink, and shut the gates." What I had so much dreaded now came to pass. On hearing Pugachev's proposal, Shvabrin quite lost his head. "Sire," he exclaimed, enraged, "I am guilty, I have lied to you, but Grinif also is deceiving you. This girl is not the priest's niece. She is the daughter of Ivan Mironov, who was executed at the taking of the fortress." Pugachev fixed his fiery eyes on me. "What does this mean?" he asked, perplexed. "Shvabrin has told thee the truth," I answered with firmness. "Thou didst not tell me of this," observed Pugachev, whose face clouded over. "Judge thyself," I replied. "How could one, in the presence of thy people, declare that Mironov's daughter was in existence? They would have torn her to pieces. Nothing could have saved her." "Thou art right again," said Pugachev, laughing. "My drunkards would not have spared the poor girl. The priest's wife has done well to deceive them." "Listen," said I, upon seeing how well disposed he appeared to be. "I do not know, and do not wish to know, by what name I am to address thee. But God is my witness, that I should be happy to pay thee with my life for what thou hast done for me. Only do not demand what is against my honor and my conscience as a Christian. Thou art my benefactor. Complete what thou hast commenced. Let me go with the poor orphan whithers over God may lead us. And we shall, wherever thou mayest be, whatever thy lot, pray to God daily for the salvation of thy sinful soul." Pugachev's untamed heart seemed touched. "Let it be as thou desirest," said he. "If one must execute, let execution be complete, and if one has to pardon, let pardon be complete. Such is my custom. Take thy little beauty. Lead her wherever thou pleasest, and may God bless your love and guide you." Here he turned to Shvabrin, and ordered him to provide me with passes for all the barriers and fortresses subject to him. Completely humiliated, Shvabrin stood petrified. Pugachev then proceeded to inspect the fortress, accompanied by Shvabrin, and I remained behind, under the pretext that I had to get ready for my journey. I rushed to the bedroom. The door was closed. I knocked. "Who is there?" asked Polashka. I announced myself. Maria Ivanovna's dear voice was heard behind the door. "Wait a little, Peter Andreevich, I am dressing. Go to Akulina Pamfilovna. I shall be there directly." I complied, and went to Father Gerasim's house. His wife and he ran out to meet me. Savelich had forestalled me. "Good day, Peter Andreevich," said the priest's wife. "God has brought us together again. How are you? We have never let a day pass without thinking of you. And Maria, my poor dove, has suffered so much during your absence. But tell me, my little father, how have you managed Pugachev? How is it that he has not done away with you?" "Well, we have to thank the wretch." "Leave off, old woman," interrupted Father Gerasim. "Do not blab out all thou knowest. There is no salvation in tale-telling. My little father, Peter Andreevich. Come in, pray come in. What a time it is since we last saw you." His wife set before me what they happened to have in the house, talking incessantly the while. She related how Shvabrin had compelled them to deliver Maria Ivanovna to him. How Maria Ivanovna cried, and would not leave them. How Maria Ivanovna communicated with them through Polashka, a sharp lass, who knew how to make the orderly even dance to her pipe. How she had advised Maria Ivanovna to write to me, and see. I, in my turn, told her my story in a few words. The priest and his wife crossed themselves, when they learned that Pugachev knew of their deception. "The power of the cross be with us," said Akulina Pamfilovna. "Do thou, O God, let the cloud pass away from us." "Well, Alexey Ivanovitch, thou art a cunning fox indeed." At that moment the door opened, and Maria Ivanovna entered, a smile playing on her pale face. She had laid aside her peasant's garb, and was dressed as usual, simply and becomingly. I seized her hand, and for a long time was unable to say a word. We were both silent, our hearts being too full. Our hosts felt that they were in the way, and left us. We remained alone. All was forgotten. We talked, and it seemed that we were not able to say enough. Maria told me all that had happened to her from the time of the taking of the fortress, describing all the horrors of her position, and all the trials to which the base Shvabrin had subjected her. We also recalled the happy past. We were both crying. At last I exposed my plans to her. To remain in the fortress, in Pugachev's power, and under the command of Shvabrin, would be impossible. One could not think of Orenburg then undergoing all the calamities of a siege. She had no relatives living. I advised her to go to my parents' property. At first she hesitated. The prejudice manifested against her by my father alarmed her. I tranquilized her. I knew that my father would consider it a happiness, and would make it his duty to receive the daughter of a worthy warrior who had perished in the service of his country. "Dear Maria Ivanovna," I said, "I look upon thee as I would upon my wife. Extraordinary circumstances have united us indissolubly. Nothing on earth can separate us." Maria Ivanovna listened to me with gentleness, without any affectation of reserve, and without inventing any excuses. She felt that her destiny was bound up with mine. But she repeated that she would only become my wife with the consent of my parents. I said nothing in opposition to this. We exchanged a passionate ardent kiss, and thus all was settled between us. An hour afterwards, an orderly brought to me a pass, signed with Pugachev's hieroglyphics, and informed me that Pugachev desired to see me. I found him ready to start. I cannot express what I felt at parting from this dreadful man, this monster, this miscreant towards everybody excepting myself. Why should I not speak the truth? At that moment I felt drawn towards him by strong sympathies. I eagerly longed to tear him away from the gang of wretches, whose leader he was, and save his head whilst there was yet time. I was hindered from expressing to him what filled my heart to overflowing, by the presence of Shvabrin and the people who were gathered about us. We parted as friends. Seeing Akulina Pamfilovna in the crowd, Pugachev shook his finger at her, and winked significantly. He then entered the kibitka, gave the order to drive to Bird, and when the horses had already started, he leant out of the kibitka, and shouted out to me, "Goodbye, your lordship. We may perhaps meet again some day." We did indeed meet, but under what circumstances? Pugachev was gone. I gazed long at the white steppe over which his troika sped. The crowd dispersed, Shvabrin withdrew. I returned to the priest's house. All was ready for our departure. I was anxious not to delay. Our luggage had been placed in the commandant's old traveling carriage. The yezchik quickly put the horses to. Maria Ivanovna went to take a last farewell of the graves of her parents, which stood behind the church. I offered to accompany her, but she begged that I should let her go alone. She returned in a few minutes, weeping silently. The carriage drove up. Father Gerasim and his wife came out. We three, Maria Ivanovna, Palashka, and I, took our places inside the kibitka. Savelich scrambled into the rumble. "Farewell, Maria Ivanovna, my little dove. Farewell, Peter Andrevich, our falcon bird," the good priest's wife said. "A happy journey to you and God bless you both." We left. I saw Shvabrin standing at a window of the commandant's house. His look was one of dark hatred. I had no desire to triumph over a humiliated foe, and turned my face away. We emerged from the fortress, and left Bylogorsk behind us forever.
KaraokeBooks.